We're conferencing on House Bill 2760, which also includes House Bill 2623. Correct. And I would recognize the chairman from the House.
Thank you. That's quite correct. You actually added those, and that was very good. They go together. We would like to have a request, the 4 bills that I told you on this piece of paper, 33, 31, 30, and 29. They were passed the House almost unanimous, except one person voted against one of them. I have no idea who he was, but it happens. But I'll have Representative Dodson explain these and turn it over to him.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Maybe just in the way of background, you may already be familiar, but for the past couple of years, we've had a conference that's met in September, October timeframe, which we bring in various veteran groups. And this last time we had, I think, 5 veterans groups come in as well as some individuals. And the idea was to let them see the things that we perhaps had already done, the related things that we had in train, that is, whether they were sitting already to be heard or whether they had been left over from last year. And then we took their comments about those things that were most important to them, and we had a little board up front, and we said, okay, we'll just go up and you pick the top 3. And we took the numbers off that board to kind of put those in sequence. So what you see today are those things that we developed. Some have sat since, well, I think I brought one last session, then it had passed the House, and then we had these that were introduced this last session. And I'll just go over those real quickly here if you like, and we can take some questions as well. So we'll just start with, mine shows 2833. And a lot of these kind of do the same things. That is, they have disability-related items in them, except for the last bill. The last bill I might do first, that one is 2829. 2829, if you recall, President Trump authorized the Space Force about 3.5 years ago. And since that time, the Space Force has organized their headquarters and has kind of made a separate service from the Air Force, although the Secretary of the Air Force still provides oversight for that as a secretary. So all this does is put the Space Force language. You can imagine how many places armed forces and things like that are mentioned in our statutes. So all this does is insert that in our statutes, and the reviser, we kind of drove them crazy trying to do all this, but this will insert the Space Force in all those places where language like armed services and armed forces are now entered. Any questions on that one? Yes, ma'am.
Senator Petty.
Thank you. So I'm looking at the supplemental notes on 2829, and you were mentioning about putting Space Force in there. So was U.S. military reserve component, was that already included in the definition?
Yes. We have various places where we either have armed services, armed forces. We have the reserves that are either Army, Navy, or Marine, or Marine and Air Force reserves. So those are included in with the Space Force.
Thank you. And you did mention the Space Force, however, is currently under the Air Force.
Secretary of the Air Force. So just like the Navy contains the secretary, or excuse me, contains the CNO of the Navy and the Commandant of the Marines, the Secretary of the Air Force contains both the Space Force and the Air Force that used to be singular.
Thank you. Wouldn't it be Air Force and Space Force? I would just, that's
Yes.
one.
Well, we used to have, they tried to make air and space together, but then they separated into two. And my Air Force magazine still says air and space on the front, so.
Any other questions?
Nope, please continue.
He-
Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just ask a question of staff. There's a bill that passed the House, 2036, that dealt with disabled veterans and property taxes, and would just ask staff if that's an item that would be eligible for amending into this package.
When we had talked with both the Senate, excuse me, the House Speaker and Speaker Pro Tem and Floor Leader, I think the objective will be to try to amend that into tax. It certainly could be entertained in here. I mean, I'd have no objection to that. I'll just have to check and see how they'd like to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if it is eligible, I'd certainly be interested in entertaining that through this committee, as we're talking about multiple items dealing with disabled veterans here. And it could easily be packaged in with that, and also just the appetite of the tax committees to take that on seems to have been problematic for getting it through, that maybe this is a opportune vehicle for that.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. The next three are related but slightly different, and the reason that these three are separate is when we asked the reviser which was the best way to go about that, they really recommended we have three separate entries. So when I first put this together, I had them all in one bill, and now we've parsed them out into three bills, but they are related. So if you like, I'll go through 2833 first. And one of the problems that we've had over time is the definitions of veteran and disabled veteran. As you look through the statutes, these were referenced in various ways. And so we went through, or rather the revisers went through the statutes and picked out various places where these were. So to clarify these terms, we went back to our own Kansas Veterans Organization, as well as asked the Military Officers Association, as well as VFW and American Legion, to get together and provide a list that was not only consistent within those parties, but also across the services. So we also went back to Washington, D.C. to make sure that all these were consistent. So as you can see there, the new definitions for disabled veteran means a person who served in the active military and includes the Space Force, received a disability that was incurred or aggravated in the line of duty, and has a service-connected evaluation percentage equal to or greater than 50%. So, and then item 2 was a veteran means a person who served in active military, naval, air, or services and who is discharged or released under conditions other than dishonorable.
I don't think we have any questions.
We'll turn to 2831. This requires that federal disability determinations be probative. That is, they will stand without further evaluation by those in other organizations. One of the things we found was when someone gets a disability finding that either comes from the Veterans Administration or other organs inside the Department of Defense, they come down and get further evaluated someplace else, and that's manifestly unfair. So all this bill does is require, and again, we use the word probative just to indicate that that will stand and others will not stand underneath it. And it then has a definition, so it says require that federal disability determinations be probative and prohibit state agencies and municipalities from reconsidering veterans' disability. So you can imagine the confusion if a veteran has a finding, let's say by the Veterans Administration, and then goes for something like a license or something, and it says, well, you've got to be reevaluated. So I think this bill went through pretty quickly and was supported by all those same veterans organizations.
Don't see any questions.
So 2830, this prescribed documentation requirements to determine eligibility for any benefit derived from a service-connected disability. So this again defined the terms for service-connected and veteran. And it also states that no state agency or municipality shall request or demand any other documents. So this is probably the most closely related to 2831, but it was required, that is, it was recommended to be separate by the revisers. But I think in the place they are now, they would recommend that we put all these together. So they specifically outline 6 forms of documentation that would be included. So those are, as you may see there, the passport, the Veterans Health Identity Card, the Veterans ID Card, Common Access Card, that's known as a CAC, or any Department of Defense ID card. So no other forms of identification be required. This was found by the Veterans Administration, Department of Defense to be completely adequate for assessing the proof of disability.
Don't think we have any questions on that one either.
If you like, at some point here, we can maybe right following our 2 o'clock on the floor, we can go back and look at 2036 if you'd like. As you may know, when it went through that committee, there was some consternation over the cost, and we had gone through this in various ways. The first time, it was probably not constitutionally sound. In other words, the word we used to describe it was inadequate. But that cost, if I remember, was about $23 million. When we used the other word, which would require funding in a different way, then it went up to about 80-something, 82 million maybe. So at that point, I think the logic for the Senate tax, this is as I understand it, was that it would place an additional burden on other taxpayers. But as we limited that bill to the percentage disability, then the amount would grow smaller. The impact would grow smaller to others. So I think most of us on the House side felt pretty good about that part. But I'll have to go back and check with Pat and the speaker just to make sure we're all on track. But I think that's a good idea.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that explanation. Thank you.
I do have a question, and it's not dealing with 2036, except I would agree with you, there was the fiscal note issue is a concern. And this is looking back at 2833, and this is just a question on my part because of lack of knowledge, but as I'm looking at the supplemental notes, and it says, "On preference in contracts for any job or service for which monies appropriated are to be expended, provided that such person has a service-connected evaluation of 10% or more." What exactly does that mean, 10% or more?
That is the lowest, if I recall, that's the lowest rating at which they give disabilities. So if you go in for a disability evaluation, generally, if you've got severe mobility issues, you'll be issued a disability above 50. If you've got cognitive issues, it could be 75 to 100%. So the 10% is usually very minor restrictions, but I don't think I've ever seen one below 10. I think that's the threshold for determining a disability that may allow disability payments through the Department of Defense.
And so, I guess this is included in this bill, 2833. So in 2833, not only is it, I think I'm trying to remember if there's things that we already have and you were listing them, they're listed under 33, like the free license plate that's provided if you're 50% or more, permanent license to hunt and fish. I think that's passed legislation.
I may phone a friend if I can.
Phone a friend.
Mr. Chair, Senator Petty, yes, all of these benefits already exist in current law. They've just been reformatted to include this new definition.
Which, thank you for that, because that makes a lot of sense. So all of those things, and as we go on, then the preference in governmental employment, the preference in contracts. So so the preference in contracts, preference in bids for contracts, and then the property tax relief for the Homestead Property Tax Refund Act. Those we already have. They were just in other locations, and now they've been all put together in 2833.
Yes.
Thank you.
Would you like me to check with the speaker and then come back on 2036, or how would you like to proceed, sir?
Yes, we'll do the same thing. We'll check our X's and make sure we got all the box checked. And then if you'll check with your leadership, we will figure a time to reconvene.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, guys. And actually, it's a House bill. You're in charge.
That concludes.
We've got a big room anyway.
Yeah, you can adjourn us.